All right, we're here for another Clean Tech Talk episode with Jose Pontes. We're going to talk about EV sales globally, starting with a focus on Europe, bit of China, bit of US, bit of rest of world as it's termed in these EV sales reports. Yeah, just sort of talk about the big trends in EV sales that we're seeing, and sort of I think the more fun thing is like what we expect, which of course we're not going to get 100% right, but it's fun to think about and discuss. So, how are you doing, Jose?
Hi there. Thank you. I'm fine and nice to be here.
Yeah, so I think we just published a Europe report, and a global world EV sales report is coming. So let's start with the Europe report, and you can even just start with your title. I think the title was fun.
Yeah, so the title was The King Tesla is Dead. Long live the old king Volkswagen. And the explanation comes as the last couple of years, Tesla has been the number one EV brand in Europe. But this year hasn't been the same performance. The Model Y is down like 50% almost this year in Europe. Of course, you have the explanation that the Model Y is in a generation change, so yeah, take it with a grain of salt. But the real point and the interesting point here is that the Model 3, that has no problems with generational change, is down 14%. So probably if the Model Y was in a regular performance, it would be around 10-15% down also.
What is the it just hit me, like there was the whole China tariffs arriving in Europe last year. Were the sales of the Model 3 higher in the first quarter because of that last year, or they weren't really much different than normal, the Model 3 sales, right?
No, actually the prices haven't changed that much. And if anything, because of the current discounts and all the financial goodies that Tesla is doing now, the price has gone down because you find now inventory units with 5,000 euros of discount, new vehicles, but in inventory.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Model 3 drop is, yeah, as you said, I think it's sort of like, because that's the killer. Because right now, Tesla optimists or Tesla fans can sort of wave it away as, oh, they've retooled the factory, production was down, that's why sales are down. Which, I've said we can't really make a solid conclusion until the second or even probably third quarter, because production was paused, and then also they're just going to automatically, they're going to be filling as much, they're going to be filling backlog orders. So it's going to be, you're not going to see steady state demand. On the flip side, you point out the Model 3 point, which is big. I'm hearing that the wait time for a new Model Y in China is already very short, which implies there's not really a backlog despite the changeover. I don't. It's a clear makeover. The vehicle looks different. The tech is better, but I'm not sure how much it like strikes as like, oh, it's a new model. Like I need this. I think people who buy them are still like, oh, it's a Tesla. And I wonder how much it matters to people that it's like refreshed.
Yeah, looking through the Model Y with China market eyes, which the orders were down in April by 20%. Yes, there were some significant improvements on the Model Y, but what about 800-volt architecture, for example? The BYD Han and the Tang, they are talking about 1,000 kilowatt charging. So they are in a different level, and something like a Xpeng G6, which is a direct competitor to the Model Y, has 800-volt architecture. So even the premium German brands are now getting into 800-volt So an important update to the Model Y would be to add 800 volt, for example. Just a little bit more range and some redesign on the front and rear. Yeah, it's a change. You can tell that it's a different model, but at the current pace, it's not enough.
I wonder too how much people struggle to see the difference in Tesla models. Like I was actually interviewing a few weeks ago a new Volkswagen ID Buzz owner, loves her ID Buzz, and before that she had a Mustang Mach-E, and before that she had a Tesla Model 3, but she couldn't remember what model of Tesla it was. She was like, it's the chief. Is that the Model Y or 3? I was like, oh my gosh, like what? Like how do you not know what car you had? But it's like a lot of people, including my wife, we've had a Model 3 for 6 years, like can't keep track of which model is which, and like they're just so similar. So even the new Model Y, it looks a lot different, but it's still like I still think people would just be like, oh, like what's the difference? You know, like a lot of normal people, not like car enthusiasts. But yeah, you make a good point, and we had a reader make a really interesting point, which was like I think under your article even that Elon Musk doesn't want to be in a competitive market, which was interesting point. I never really thought much about because he talks so much about being the most innovative and whatever, but he likes to be like at the forefront of a market and like a first mover. And when it gets to the stage where they're at, where they need, where all these automakers roll out tons of models, they're doing all these different models and variations. He wants to stick to like two main models that just will win because everybody thinks they're better. But now there's like 100 models that are competitive. Like you can have so much choice, and it just seems like Tesla's not interested in diversifying and offering a lot of variations and whatnot in order to keep sales up.
Yeah, actually, diversification is one of the issues that Tesla currently has. For example, in that Europe article, there was a reader that said, yeah, big crisis at Tesla, but still they are number one and number two in the models ranking. And I replied, yes, that's true, but imagine that you're a manager of a team like the LA Lakers or Paris Saint-Germain. If you have two great players, which are the best players in the league, but then the rest of the team sucks, you won't get anywhere. And that's the issue that Tesla currently has. Yes, it has two good models, but then the full-size segment, nothing. The S and the X, they are overdue for a generation change for years. And then the Cybertruck, well, we all know what's that thing.
Yeah, I thought that was funny, and I brought up these charts here from your report. So this is like the model chart, and when you look at the model chart, like it's looked for years, it's like, oh wow, Tesla's dominating. They got the top two models by far. But then I gotta navigate back there. When you switch to the brand chart, Tesla's way down in fourth at 6.4%, Volkswagen 10.8%. It's a dramatic, Tesla's not close to number one in this case. And then if you even go further and go to, Group, Volkswagen Group, 26.5%. And Tesla's not even in, it's in the others category here because it's not even in the top five, which I think that's a big point. But as long as the Model Y and Model 3 are at the top, like people have a hard time seeing that, right?
Yeah, and for example, yes, looking at the models table, the Model Y is number one, the Model 3 is number two, but then the Volkswagen Group has 8 models in the top 20. So the collective wins over 2 models.
Hey, EV drivers, how much could you be saving on charging? Enter your zip code at ev.energy/join to find the best deals and utility programs near you. Sign up, connect your EV, and let EV Energy handle the rest, helping you save money and even earn cash incentives where available. Smarter charging, lower costs, and a smaller carbon footprint. What are you waiting for? Start earning today with EV Energy.
let's shift to Volkswagen a bit because I like you pointed out in the article, sort of like, is it the BYD of Europe now? Because BYD like dominates it's got like, I don't know, like 18 out of 20 top 20 model, not that much, but close. And Volkswagen, like you said, has been growing. It's the number of models that are in the top 20. Can you speak a little bit about the evolution of Volkswagen Group in Europe and in the EV market in general?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't expecting that much from Volkswagen this year. I was expecting, oh yeah, they need to go and sell more because of the CO2 quotas. But apart from the new Skoda Elroq, they have no new models. I mean, the ID4 has been around for a few years. The Enyaq has been around for a few years. The ID3 has been around for a few years. The Audi Q4 has been for a few years. So new cars, it's the Skoda Elroq that's now starting and adding new volume. And it's the Volkswagen ID7. And the Volkswagen ID7, which is currently number 6, is quite interesting because it's a direct competitor to the Tesla Model 3. And it has struck a chord into the company car market in Europe, which is huge.
And it's been climbing. Yeah, it just keeps climbing up the chart, right?
So it could be the case, and this will depend on a lot of stuff, not only what geopolitics will mean in 6 months from now, but what Elon Musk will do 6 months from now. But it could be the case that the ID7 by the end of this year could surpass the Tesla Model 3.
Yeah, that would be something, huh? I remember when the ID7 came out, so, Volkswagen's new flagship model looked great, but it was a bit expensive, sort of seeming. But it just seems like it just gets more and more competitive and more popular, which is a very strong sign for like long-term success, right? You want to slow and steady, grow, maybe don't come out of the gates super hot, but just keep keep gaining ground. So it's really climbed up. I mean, you still have the ID4 as their top seller, number 3 bestseller on the year to date, Volkswagen ID4, and then right behind it, Skoda Enyaq, and then ID7 is 6th. Looking at this chart that I have featured right now, if you're just listening, and number 8 you have Volkswagen ID3, Audi Q4 e-tron number 9. They just keep coming. So it's like you've got a few other brands sprinkled in between there, and then several more. Cupra Born even in there at number 20. And then I guess that great sign for Volkswagen Group. I want to get to BYD, which is funny because it sneaks in there at number 12 with primarily a plug-in hybrid, but I just first want to talk a little bit more about Volkswagen Group. How do you see its situation globally? I mean, it looks like it's doing very well in Europe, and it is going to be doing very well in Europe, but globally, and especially in China, where it's a hyper-competitive market that's sort of pushing out legacy automakers, how do you see its position?
Yeah, that's the billion-dollar question. Everybody is aware at this point that if they don't react, Toyota, Volkswagen, everyone will basically either be a niche player in China or disappear. And now everybody's trying to do something to react, like the new Audi in caps that they showed in Shanghai, or the new models from Toyota, or the new models from Volkswagen. People want to do something now in China, because if they don't react in the next 6-12 months, they are out of China. They are no longer significant players in China, which can take us also to Tesla, where, yes, they will need something new in China, probably those new low-cost versions of the Model 3 and Model Y. But that's not to gain share. It's just to keep the share they have. If they keep the share they have, it's already very good for Tesla.
Yeah, we'll talk about them a little bit more and then jump to BYD. So, I had a poll a couple months ago, like where is Tesla facing the most sales threat? Because in the U.S., it's got extreme threat from Elon Musk getting involved in politics to an extreme degree, doing a lot of stuff that's absolutely insane by a lot of, according to a lot of us, and really damaging the brand. It's had such a big share of the U.S. market. So in the past, it was even like 80% share. Now it's below 50%. Europe, the question was, how much his Nazi salute and supporting the far right AfD party in Germany and these things would hurt the brand in Europe. And we have some European readers who are like, Tesla's dead in Europe. We have others who are like, oh, it's doing fine. People don't care. So it's very interesting the different perspectives you get from different people, like who are basically in different circles, or just more or less involved in politics, I think. I like how you've broken down that you expect like 10 to 15% of a sales hit from politics in Europe, right? Do you feel like it's the most, do you, yeah, what can you say about that? Just the political hit, and then we'll get to other topics.
Yeah, so I think the political hit to Tesla sales can be broken down in three different markets. Let's say, yes, the main problem that Tesla has in the US, basically, it's politics. In Europe, I think it's a mix. It's a bit politics, but also the fact that we have more models available, we have more competition. So, for example, I see one thing that is correlating with Tesla's decline, which is BYD growth. The cars that BYD are selling the most, like the Seal U, which is basically the mid-size SUV Song, and the Seal, which is a mid-size sedan, basically are direct competitors to the Model Y and Model 3. So it seems like many people are basically, oh, I won't buy Teslas anymore. What else? Where else is there on the market? Oh, there's BYD. And they are flocking to BYD. So in Europe, it's a bit of a mix between a more competitive market and also politics. In China, currently, it's more basic market dynamics. Of course, if tariffs continue to evolve as they have been evolving, yeah, probably also the politics.
Yeah, this has been my take as well, my perspective. We should mention Canada as well. The Canadians are absolutely pissed, like absolutely pissed. The jokes about Canada, the semi-jokes, I should say, about Canada becoming a 51st state have pissed people off. Elon Musk's adding to those jokes and making the same comments despite having lived, having had Canadian citizenship. Like, I think the most absolutely ballistic people I've heard from are Canadians, and so I think they're taking a big hit there. But Paul, exactly what you said. Also, I think in the U.S. this shouldn't be discounted because, like, within a few years, model choices like tripling or quadrupling. Like compared to a few years ago, we had like almost nothing on the market. Very limited choice, and now we're actually getting a lot of choice. And just in my area, which is a very big EV adoption area, it used to be just you see Teslas everywhere, and here and there you see another EV. And now you see other EVs constantly. There's other EVs are everywhere. Constantly seeing the Cadillac Lyriq, the Mustang Mach-E, even the Hummer EV and the Escalade IQ. You can see the market here is it's a weird market compared to what you're used to, I'm sure. But yeah, I'm surrounded by these behemoths on the road. You see the Lightning a lot. You see a lot of Ioniq 5s, EV6s. So you just have a lot of competitive EVs that you didn't have. So I feel like that is absolutely like a bigger situation in Europe and even bigger in China. So it's like Tesla just feels like it's like resting on its laurels, complacent. It still sells a lot based on inertia and brand inertia, I feel like. And I feel like in China, especially where it was like this cutting edge, hot company, it's got to be shifting. I mean, we just look at the products. It's got to be shifting where consumers start seeing it as a legacy automaker that's slow to innovate and see all of the innovation happening in the Chinese companies. And it feels like that could be the biggest threat to Tesla because it gets about half of its sales from China. And so like if it loses that status as like a must-have brand in China, that's gonna be a bloodbath, right?
Yeah. And it's not a good sign that Tesla decided to skip on the Shanghai Auto Show because number one, all the Chinese are there and they are launching new models. And but the interesting thing is that legacy automakers also decided to launch their new models in China in Shanghai. So if Tesla had been there and hadn't shown anything, it would be like, oh, these guys, they are even worse than legacy automakers.
Yes, exactly. I mean, they're starting to feel. That's what I was going to say too about Europe, the European market. It's starting to feel like I don't know if my mind is playing tricks on me, but I feel like Tesla is innovating slower than legacy automakers, and it's becoming the lazy, complacent, big giant in the room, while the others are just innovating and rolling out new models with new features a lot faster. Do you feel like that in Europe?
Yeah, and actually, we can go also to the global sales because something that startled me when I did the OEM numbers for global sales was that number one, Tesla lost a third of its share that it had a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So a year ago, they had just on BEVs, they had around 19%. They were number one. Now they have 12% and they are number two. But what was also interesting was that in the same period, the Volkswagen Group globally in BEVs increased its share by 1.3%. So they are gaining market share.
I'm super curious about these other markets because you have BYD entering them, sort of waking them up, and they're clearly the leaders. But then you've got Hyundai and Kia, you've got the EV3, you've got the Hyundai Inster, and Volkswagen, has got a huge range of models. But you just wonder, like, how long until Hyundai, Kia, and Volkswagen Group are taking these markets quite seriously. They're increasing in EV market share quite rapidly in some of these countries. Like how much until they are right behind BYD, you can say, or similar to BYD in these developing markets? What do you think?
That is an interesting question, and I can actually raise the case of Turkey because it is an interesting model. So Tesla came in, it disrupted a little bit the market, but the legacy OEMs didn't did anything. But then when BYD came and basically opened up the doors completely, they were like, oh, we need to do something or else we will lose another market like we did in China. So now they are launching their EVs in Turkey because we won't make the same mistake we did in China. So we need to come earlier into the market and defend our market share.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, especially thinking about South America where we get these reports. They're not really doing that yet, but I just feel like it's got to be around the corner. Like they've got to see the writing on the wall and think, okay, we need to get competitive there before it's too late. And yeah, the crazy thing is with Tesla, like it has such a huge global brand, global appeal. It was just at the forefront of everything, and it could just have entered a lot more markets. Like it's in a fair number of markets, but when you see even just where Xpeng and Neo as well as BYD just keep entering market after market, like that's what I sort of expected Tesla to do like 2 or 3 years ago. And again, it just seems like a lazy approach to like, oh, it's not going to scale up enough, or the volumes are not high enough, like it's not worth it or something. And it's like not really respecting like long term you should be in every market, right? Like if you want to be the world leader, like you should be in these markets. So just enter them while your brand is hot, you know? And I don't even see like Tesla doing it now, even like following. It's just sort of, yeah, so you just sort of expect that BYD and certain key legacy automakers like Volkswagen, Hyundai, Kia. Are there any others that I'm missing that you think will, I mean, of course, there's the Geely brand, I mean, Geely Group, but
Yeah, that's an interesting take because, first of all, explaining Tesla's situation, they went into markets where they knew that the Model Y and Model 3 would sell a lot. But in some markets in Asia, that's possible. In other markets like Mexico, you can still sell quite a few units. But then you hit protectionist markets like India or Brazil, and then you need to make cars there. And that's not something that Tesla is used to deal with, like doing small production for just that country. Second of all, and this was a mistake I mentioned in my articles years ago when the Cybertruck was the priority, is that when Tesla prioritized Cybertruck over the $25 EV, they committed the same mistake that GM and others did, which is prioritize the US market over the global market. Because if you want to go into most of Latin American countries, you need smaller cars, cheaper cars. Because a Model 3 or a Model Y is a niche car in those places. So you need $25, the $25,000 car to go in there. And because they didn't have it, they knew that it was just not profitable enough to go there, which opened the door to all the Chinese that are now coming. The Geelys, the Cherries, the BYDs, because they have cheap cars that are good enough for Latin American countries. They are good enough for globally. And funny enough, the only company that I see in the US that is trying to do something in Latin America is General Motors. They are starting to sell their EVs there. Of course, they are still expensive. But what I think will happen is once the new Bolt comes in, so will be a new Bolt somewhere in the future, that's the ideal car to market in Latin America and fight the Chinese brands.
yeah, we've had our Juan, our South American correspondent, has been covering that, the GM's, seeming, move in South America. And yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, when you talked about the Tesla situation, it just makes like, it just seems like there was such a narrow focus on just mass scale. Everything's got to be mass scale. So it's got to be only mass scale. I mean, not counting the Cybertruck, which I think is a kind of pet project. Mass scale models, mass, gigafactories. And like, if it wasn't that, Elon Musk didn't want to mess with it. Didn't want to have a lot of different variations of models, not even a lot of color choice. Didn't want to, have, like you said, small localized factories. It had to be gigafactories. If he was going to go somewhere, it had to be a gigafactory, right? And even the idea of, having a factory in Mexico like died off, ran into issues. It's like, I don't know, it just seems like the potential to become something much bigger just died. And maybe it's still around the corner with the cheaper models. I'm not really that bullish on this, but he is still saying they're working on these cheaper models. The question is whether they're like knocked down, stripped down Model 3s and Model Ys, or actually like something like the Hyundai Inster, or the BYD Seagulls, something that's actually designed for these other kind of buyers, other markets. But yeah, it is really interesting to watch sort of the legacy automakers, how closely behind they're going to follow BYD from Volkswagen Group to GM. But yeah, well, let's get into the crazy fun of Well, let's do two things. So let's give an update on where we are as far as percentage of. Oh, there's one more thing. Yeah. So before we get to those two things, I I do this report on the share of vehicles in the share of brands sales in the U.S. Okay, I'm trying to share the screen. Hold on one second. That are fully electric vehicles, and just to sort of see who's leading in terms of like relative sales. So this is BEV share of auto brand sales and then auto group sales in the U.S. Of course, you have like the 100% brands. I left them in there. Sort of puts the scale, gives you a 100% scale to look at. So in the first quarter of this year, Fiat 86%. I mean, it's basically it sells almost no vehicles in the U.S., but they're almost entirely EVs now. Getting past that, you get Porsche at 23%. Porsche has always been near, at the top of this kind of ranking. It is impressive though. 1 out of 4 Porsches almost is a fully electric vehicle in the U.S. And a Cadillac 19%, almost 1 out of 5. And like I said, I see the Lyric everywhere. I feel like I used to see the whatever that X5, I forget what it's called, but this gas Cadillac I used to see everywhere, and now I barely see it, and I see the Lyric everywhere. So it's really interesting how much the Cadillac is switching to an EV market. And then you get all these luxury brands, so premium brands: Acura, BMW, Audi, Volkswagen. But Volkswagen is sort of almost like a premium brand in the U.S. It's not like a Toyota or a Honda in people's mind, or a Chevrolet. But the point is, like, you get to the mass market brands and they're like at 4 to 5%. Chevrolet, Kia, Ford, Honda, even though they seem like they're leading in volume terms sometimes. And so, question is like how fast do we transition from? Two questions. One, is this the case in Europe and China, where I haven't done these kind of reports? Is it the same story? And how fast do we transition from, premium segment doing much more to transition to EVs than the mass market segment?
Yeah, so this is something I've been talking about in the Europe articles for the last couple of years, which was the fact that in Europe, the best-selling brands for EVs were premium brands. It was the BMWs, it was Mercedes, it was Volvo, it was Tesla, that at the time was still premium without starting to discount their inventory units, etc., etc. Now the shift is slowly changing because Volkswagen is much more into EVs because of quotas, but also because I think they realize that they can't wait anymore. And the case of Renault, for me, it's also interesting because they realized, okay, if we stick to ICE, we will probably lose to the new competitors coming out of China. So yeah, the Renault 5 is a hit. The Renault Scenic, the compact crossover, is becoming a hit. It has reached a record number in March, and people expect the new Renault 4 small crossover to be also a hit. So the more mainstream brands are becoming more EV friendly, because I think they're realizing that if they don't go EV soon, if they don't change their ways, the Chinese will just come on and eat their market share. And the example can be seen with the BYD Seal U, which is the mid-size crossover from BYD, which was number 8 in March. Mostly on PHEV, yes, but also around 1,000 units coming from the BEV version. So,
and the plug-in hybrid story is that they put tariffs on Chinese BEVs, but they didn't put tariffs extra tariffs on Chinese plug-in hybrids. So it's a weird situation.
Yeah, it's created some side effects that I don't think no one was expecting. So what, for example, NG, which is now Chinese, but it was in the past a British brand, because of these tariffs, has invested a lot in PHEVs, but also in ICE models like plugless hybrids, etc. And now they have the issue that because they are selling so many ICEs, they are their quotas of EVs need to be expanded, or they just need to sell less ICE units because their CO2 quotas is going over the roof.
It's such a stupid thing to just put extra taxes on BEVs when you're trying to increase BEV market share. It just it's so frustrating. But yeah, I mean you point out what a lot of readers have said, which is like, eventually they're going to come and they're going to be competitive. Like you can put tariffs on right now to try to stop some of it, but then they're going to produce in Europe, but they're just going to be competitive in this segment. But I also feel like the increasing fuel economy standards or CO2 requirements push these automakers to sell more of the mass market models in electric. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And talking about Stellantis, which is an interesting case, it is quite a coincidence that all their new small BEVs started their careers just in the beginning of this year or December last year.
Yeah, it's not even like it's not well hidden at all that the automakers shift things around based on the CO2 requirements of their fleets, and then you all of a sudden discover that they actually can sell a lot more EVs and in mass market segments and everything like that once they're forced to. It's like, because the idea is like, oh, customers don't want them, but once they're forced to, somehow customers buy their products, right? Somehow they find customers who want them all of a sudden. So it's like, it's really annoying because you can see the potential that's just sitting there latent. But yeah, it is really exciting to see the mass market. I mean, if you look at that chart from March, you got the Renault 5. You would still categorize the Skoda Enyaq as a mass market vehicle, right? Or, I mean,
Yeah, I would say so.
upper end mass market like the ID4. But then you get the EV3, a smaller Kia, the CLU, and
The new Elrock, which is also a smaller but cheaper version of the Skoda Enyaq, and also the Citroën E3, which is a small, cheap EV, which will have a Fiat cousin called the Fiat Grande Panda EV, and we'll have also something from Opel based on the same platform. And those models, coincidentally, are all coming to the market right now.
yeah. And it's funny because, you see it like once they scale these up and sell them more in Europe, you expect, hey, we should sell these in South America, in Africa, in Asia. You would just expect that they're going to then start expanding production to sell overseas. And Africa is a really interesting case. We'll have to do a whole segment on separately because, they buy so many used vehicles from Europe, Japan, and there just seems like huge potential to jump from doing that to buying cheap EVs that are more reliable, that cost less to operate, that are better for like some, so you can imagine, and you've got that situation like Ethiopia, which is requiring, like has very strong, transition to all EVs plan and not budging. But you can see this happening across the continent, like the potential for this and these smaller Chinese and maybe European EV models just taking over, and it'd be really interesting to see what happens then to like used car price, leasing, all of these kind of extra factors, like that these automakers count on unloading these used off lease, for example, ICE vehicles to other countries, right?
Yeah, actually, Africa is an interesting story because yes, in the past, they basically imported a lot of used ICE units. But now what's going on is that a lot of the Chinese EVs that have now 3 years, 4 years, and the lease is over, they are being sent to Africa. And funny enough, because legacy OEM EVs are not in demand in China, they are finding a new home in Africa. So it is interesting to see Chinese made Volkswagens appearing in Africa, like the Volkswagen ID.6, which is not sold outside of China, is now showing up across Africa.
That's fun. So the two things I wanted to wrap up with. First one is what's the global share of what's the share of auto sales that are full electrics now globally, and where do you see that going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, so regarding plugins as a whole, so PHEV plus BEVs, they currently have 21% of the total market. Just sticking with BEVs have 14% of the total sales of light vehicles. And basically it gives you a more or less 1/3 PHEV, 2/3 BEVs breakdown of plug-in sales. And I guess it will stay that way for a while because one thing that we learned in the Chinese market was that at a given point, you need PHEVs, or in their case, also extended range vehicles, to go into the large majority of buyers. You don't give the jump from, 30% to 50% without a significant share of PHEVs.
Which is what they've done recently. They've gone from about 30% plug-in vehicle share to over 50% on the back of a big rise in plug-in hybrids or extended range electric vehicles.
Yeah, so I
do
guess
wonder and worry about that a bit, like that they're hitting targets that they have to hit, but I wonder like how much buyers who are not willing to go full electric just don't have good charging options or don't feel like charging publicly, and might be relying on the fossil fuels while buying a plug-in hybrid because they can, or whatever. I'm very curious about how that is and how it develops. But at the same time, there's so many people who you meet that just don't feel comfortable. They think it's a big deal to switch to a conventional hybrid, even, and they just need that stepping stone vehicle to make them comfortable, understanding BEV life is different. It's easy and convenient.
This is a hot topic. I can tell you this. My view is that plug-in hybrids do have a role in the transition. And also, we need to take in mind that the current PHEVs are not the same that they were 10 years ago. Even in Europe, you have PHEVs with 25 kilowatt batteries. So you can walk around with 100 kilometers or 60 miles range in electric mode. So it's quite comfortable, and it starts to make sense to have for the local commute to walk around in EV mode, and then for the long trip on the weekend you can just use the gas engine. But in China, of course, they are in a different level. There are many plug-in hybrids there that have 40 kilowatt or 50 kilowatt battery.
But there's also people live in these mega cities with, live in big apartment buildings and perhaps just don't have good charging options, And, but I mean, the trick is you're always going to, with plug-in hybrids, extended range electric vehicles, you're always going to sell some to people who are not going to use them in electric mode. The question is like how much you're expanding, how much you're growing electric driving versus just selling plug-in vehicles. And I think you're always, except in weird cases like the Netherlands had, your primarily expanding electric driving with these vehicles. The question is, there's just always going to be some percentage that are not going to use the electric mode, right?
Yeah. I think in Europe, particularly, PHEVs in the beginning got a bad reputation because they were mostly bought by company car buyers. And basically, the end users of those cars, they used it as a regular ICE car and couldn't care less about plugging them in. So if you do some fiscal changes so that BEVs are prioritized for company cars and PHEVs are also more for private buyers. If you buy a PHEV as a private buyer, you have every incentive to save as much as you can by using the EV part of it, especially if you have a car with a long range, let's say 100 kilometers or 60 miles.
Yeah, there were some mistakes in the policies and the incentives used, and side effects people didn't really foresee, I think. So we're at like 14% BEV market share globally. What do you see that becoming in the next we can stick to 3 years. 5 years is getting pretty wild. 3 is hard enough.
Okay, so starting with China, I think they will be fully electrified by 2030. Like electrified, not 100% PV.
Yeah, 100% plug-in vehicles by 2030.
Yeah, so 100% plugins by 2030.
And if you keep that expectation of 2/3 BEVs, that would be like 67% BEVs, but maybe you would see that being lower by then. Or it's hard to know because the technology innovates so quickly, so it could be higher, could be lower, depending on. But plug-in vehicles overall just becoming the market.
Also interesting is that because the Chinese market is the biggest in the world, I think it's like 25 million units in a 85 million global market. Just the fact that that market alone is 100% plug-in gives you, what, 33% of market share? Just that factor alone. Europe, I would say 50% around that time, maybe more, but it will depend a lot of politics and how things will evolve. But yeah, regarding the US, I have no idea what's going to happen.
The U.S. market is funny because, well, aside from uncertainty around what's happening with California's Clean Air Act waiver, which has existed for decades, because anyway, I think the thing with the U.S. is they will just be seen as better vehicles by more and more people. I see that happening routinely here, where it's just natural, like technological adoption curve, trends, regulations aside, and you just see more and more people realizing. And you also have such, more and more detached houses with garages. You have a big market of buyers who have extremely easy charging, and most of them still think they need 1,000-mile vehicles. They don't realize they can live a much better life, more convenient, life today. But I think that just gets out. So, but yeah, it's a very hard market to read. So globally, you're just Europe 50 to 60% plug-in vehicle.
Could be possible, yeah.
And the U.S., if we put it at maybe 30%, 30 to 50%. I don't know. I don't know by 2030. 5 years is a long time.
Yeah, maybe 30 to 50.
Yeah. So, would you want to throw your hat in on a global percentage? Plug-in vehicle and BEV?
So we are now at 21. I think 50% could be possible.
Plugins and maybe 30% or so BEV.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing is just what do you circling back to Tesla because it's fun to talk about. It has been for over a decade. What do you see actually happening with Tesla in these markets in the next few years? China, Europe, and maybe US.
It will, as I said on the comment section, actually, I think Tesla will find a way to survive. The big question is how much damage will be done to the brand until they find their way and they fire Elon Musk. Because there's a couple of ways this could go. They could basically survive independent and become a sort of mainstream brand, low-cost brand. Or if the brand is too damaged, then they will be bought by someone. And then it will be something like a smaller operation. It will continue to be big in America, of course. For starter advantage there, and it will probably stay as number one in the US. In Europe, if the brand is too damaged, then they either stay as a niche brand or they just disappear, get out. In China, it's basically the same story, but with increased geopolitical risks.
Yeah, I sort of feel, I'm sort of morphing to the idea that China is where they're going to take the biggest hit because, first of all, I just think the competition there is too strong. Like, I'm just thinking over time, it will be less and less seen as like the cutting edge hot brand, and more consumers will be shifting to Chinese companies with quicker innovation, better tech. And I think that's sort of not. There's a brand inertia that is helping Tesla a lot right now, and I think that just fades away unless something really changes. And at the same time, like with the snap of someone's fingers in China, all of a sudden Tesla could be a voodoo brand. Like there's always the risk. One, if Xi Jinping just decides one day I've had enough, or I'm not happy with what something Elon's doing, like there's such risk there. So I don't, but it's really the competition. I just don't see Tesla competing well, like in 3 to 5 years. But we'll see. And then Europe sort of similar. I think what you've said before, like there's maybe a 10 to 50% sales hit from people who are more tied into politics or care more. And I think that's sort of the case where Tesla can still do fine in the US and I think even in Europe, despite the political hit.
I agree.
But in Europe, again, you have more of the competition growing. In the US as well, but not nearly like to the degree as in Europe. So you have a question of the political hit with the growing competition. Like, what will that do to Tesla? Will it do enough to like really put Berlin operations in jeopardy and the brand in jeopardy? I don't know. I have no idea on that.
I have 2 ideas on that. So number one, regarding the Chinese market, yeah, it's in a point where the next 2 or 3 years will decide the future of foreign brands. Maybe half of them will just leave the market. The ones that stay either are going to stay as, let's say, a niche brand or a premium brand with not large scale operations, but big enough to be profitable.
But then how do you do that when your tech's not as good? And when there's like maybe a cultural shift that goes from saying, oh, you have to buy foreign to buy premium to going to saying, hey, Chinese companies are better. You know, I feel like that shift is underway.
Yes. That's why, for example, Volkswagen is teaming up with Chinese companies, launching models with Chinese platforms, with Chinese software. Same thing is happening with Toyota, etc., etc. The problem with Tesla in that aspect is the culture of the company, which does not sit well with cooperations. So either they do it by themselves, but for that they need to realize that they have a problem, and at this moment they are not realizing that they have a problem. So if they do realize they have a problem and they change, they might find a way out and remain in China. But if they continue to have their heads in the sand, it will be a matter of time.
Yeah, fun stuff, interesting stuff.
In Europe, it's interesting because, first of all, Tesla will have more time. But on the other hand, you have the issue of Berlin. So as a reader in my last Europe article mentioned, Giga Berlin is being has a low utilization rate. It's basically running at a very low rate. So if Tesla sales continue to go down in Europe, basically it won't be profitable anymore. And there will be the temptation to basically close down Berlin. But then the consequence of that is that if they close Berlin, then they will basically be outside of the main European market and will remain a niche brand that imports their units either from China or from the US.
Yeah, big. There's a big question there. But don't worry, they'll produce robots, humanoid robots there. This is a dream we will not get into today. I don't think that's the path forward there. But yeah, well, thanks a lot, Jose. Wonderful updates, discussion. Yeah, fun stuff. So thanks a lot, and we'll keep an eye on all of your reports, EV sales reports that we publish on CleanTechnica. Thank you.